all, and welcome to my channel, Fred Makes Things, and video one of a two-part series where we make something. Today we are talking how to do some beginner-friendly, easy to make quilt blocks, and then on Friday's video, video number 2, we're going to talk about turning those quilt blocks into an oversized trivet. This video is going to be in 5 parts. Timestamps are on the screen, in the description box, and as chapters in the video. So if there is something that you clicked on this video for specifically, feel free to use those timestamps. But yeah, so part 1 is going to be talking the supplies you're going to need to make these quilt blocks. Part 2 is going to be talking about our first block, our 9-patch block. Part 3 is going to be talking about the second block, a disappearing 4-patch. Part 4 is going to be talking about our third block, a simple pumpkin block. And then part 5 is going to be talking about the supplies that we're going to need for Friday's video for making the trivet, and also our generalized sign-off. Before we get started, I do want to say hello to everybody. Hello to the new subscribers, the OGs, anyone in between. Hello to the people who have clicked on this video curious about some simple quilt blocks and walkthroughs for that. To anyone who's been on the channel for a while and hasn't subscribed, or anyone that the algorithm may have suggested this video to, you are also very much appreciated. Your kind and thoughtful comments are always so welcome in the comment section, and do let me know if there's any kinds of simple quilt blocks that you like making, and I may do another one of these videos in the future. So with all of that being said, let's get into part 1, or yeah, the general sewing supplies that you need. So it's very simple. You're going to need scrap blocks of varying colors, or a couple of fat quarters. All 3 of these blocks are fat quarter friendly, and if you cut things in the right way, you may only need 3 or 4 fat quarters. This is a change. Hey, I got a comment today that said, came for the unboxings, stayed for Sweet Junior. Junior was in the first iteration of my attempt to make this video, but he got mad at me and left. And now we have Susie for our 3rd iteration of this video, and she never comes up to say hi. She is the first cat that we fostered here in the States with her 6 babies. So I'm going to let her stay for as long as she wants to, because she doesn't come and hang out with me very often. So where was I? General supplies. So these are fat quarter friendly blocks. The largest cut that we make is 14.5 inches long, by like 1.5 or 2 inches wide. 2.5 inches wide. So they are all fat quarter friendly. So you're going to want a bunch of different fat quarters. What I did is I pulled from 2 fat quarter bundles that I picked up at Joann Fabrics last year when the Halloween stuff went on clearance. These are Singer Halloween fabrics. The other thing that you're going to need is matching thread. I just used white on these, but when it comes time for quilting in the next video, it's going to be some sort of coordinating thread. I'm undecided right now what color, but it's going to be like a pink or an orange or a purple or something like that. So I'm going to insert this little clip as I'm cleaning up the mess in the items that you need section, because I forgot to do it there, and I am not going back and filming that again. Something that I forgot to mention as I was first initially telling you all this, but it's something to keep in mind when you're picking fabrics. So for your 9-patch and your disappearing 4 patch, it doesn't really matter what fabrics you choose. No matter what you pick, it's going to look pretty cool in the end. A word of caution when it comes to choosing fabrics for the pumpkins, if you're going to do the pumpkins. Your border pieces can be any fabric that you choose. Here's one more on the solid side. Here is one more on the patterned side. But for your background fabric, you want to pick something very, very simple and non-directional. And I say that because of how many pieces you're putting together. If you do like a very simple print, like this purple here, that would look really cool. Another couple of options for simple prints will be flashed up on the screen for you too, but I just suggest a simple one because of how many pieces that you're putting together. And you don't want to worry about directionality right away when you're cutting out pieces, so you want to make sure like your background piece and these pieces all match together. All right, and if you do a solid or a very simple print, you're not a simple non-directional print, you're not going to notice the differences in direction. If you choose something a bit more fussy, there is a chance, like a larger print, like the ghosts, anything really in this 9 patch. If you choose anything like that, you will see your joins a little bit more. So I would choose specifically for the pumpkins a solid or a simple print for that. Yeah, that's just something I want to interject here as I finish talking. This video is going to be so long as it is, but I guess that's the nature of the beast when you talk about 4 different patterns. So anyway, I will leave you with talking part 2 and a continuation of maybe Susie being in the space, because I just realized by doing this interruption I might be cutting out Susie a little bit. Anyways, yeah, I leave you with part 2, and filming me is going to start talking part 5. All right, I don't think she's gonna leave, so I'm gonna have to put her on the floor, which kind of sucks because, like I said, she doesn't normally come hang out with me. She's very much an independent girl. It's okay, the moment I go to pick her up, she's gonna bolt. You ready, Mama? Yeah, today's not the day for this video. Today's not the day. All right, so I have no idea how much Susie you got to see there, but it's rare. It is so rare for her to hang out with me. If I'm crocheting on the couch in the morning or something and she can sit next to me and stare at the birds, she'll do that. But this here was the very first time that she jumped up and laid on the desk in front of me like Junior. And I have had her since March of 2021. So that's just too cool. Anyway, let's get into part 2. Talking about the 9 patch. Outside of the 4 patch, right, which is just 4 patches, I think the 9 patch is one of the easiest beginner quilt blocks that you can make. All that we need to do is take 9 equal sized squares and sew them together. For the purposes of this video tutorial, we are doing 5-inch squares, and I have 9 different fabrics that I'm working with. Because like I had said in my part 1, I pulled these, or I bought these fabrics last year on clearance. So the only one that I'm missing is the orange or gray version of this dog, but everything else is from those 2 packs. Anyway, so we're doing 5 by 5 inch squares, and we're doing a true 1/4 inch seam allowance. There's nothing to be too fussy about. Everything is 1/4 inches. And if this comes out a little wonky for you, don't worry, you can always square it at the end. Because I have made these I've tried anyway to make these very beginner friendly. So anyway, if you're pulling from like 3 or 4 or 2 fat quarters or what have you, pull to your heart's content. If you have like 3 different fabrics you're using, you want 3 of each. If you're using 4 fabrics, you're gonna have 2 of each with 1 extra, and so on and so forth. Having different numbers of matching fabrics will just create different looking blocks. And there's actually a lot of fun to play around with that too. So first off, we're gonna lay out our fabric in an order that we like. Making sure that if you're using directional fabric, like almost all of this is directional fabric, that all of your directions point in the same way, so it looks a little bit more cohesive when you're done. Lay them out in a 3 by 3 by 3 pattern, and I'm going to call them, or I'm going to label them with letters so that you can follow along. There is also going to be a directions page in the description box, like a PDF, so that you can go to that, download that PDF so that you can follow along as well. There's a million tutorials or options online too, but if you want to follow the PDF that I put together or will be putting together, feel free to do so. Link is in the description box, and it's just going to be a Google Drive link. So anyways, we're going to label our squares. Starting in the top left hand corner, we're going to call it A, B, C across. D, E, F is our second row. G, H, and I is our third row. From there, we're going to sew A and B together, D and E together, and G and H together. When those are done, we're going to attach C to A and B and call that row 1. F to the second row, right? So F to D and E, we're going to call that row 2. And then I to G and H, and we're going to call that row 3. So we have 1, 2, 3. To iron them, I'm going to flip this over so you can see. We're going to iron our 1 and 3 in one direction, and we're going to iron row 2 in the opposite direction. So I have these 3, if you have it flipped over, or I have row 1 going to the left, row 2 going to the right, and row 3 going to the left. And what that does is it makes it so that your 2 seams, when you join them together, will nest together and help create a much flatter seam. Here's a picture of it nesting together. There's been pictures all along, but this is the cue if you want to see exactly what nesting looks like to the best of my photographic abilities. That's a nested seam. So once everything is ironed and flat, we are going to sew our rows together. So we're going to sew row 1 and 2 together. We can iron it now, or we can press it later, or iron it now, iron it later, press it now, press it later. It doesn't really matter. And then we're going to sew 1 and 2 rows, 1 and 2 to 3 together. And now, no matter what, you want to press that together. I did open seams for that. You can press it up, you can press it down. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but when I have like nested seams and stuff like that, and I don't want to like put too much bulk on one side or the other, I just press my seams open. A couple of tricks that I should have mentioned at the beginning, but I sew everything on a medium small stitch pattern. So this is my machine. This goes from stitch length 1 to stitch length 5, and for these I did it around a 2 just to keep everything nice and tight together, but you can stitch at the stitch length that you're most comfortable with. A lot of the times I do 2.5 when I'm sewing, but lately when I've been quilt piecing, especially small pieces, I do a stitch length of 2. So if your seams nested perfectly, I pin on my seams, or I use clips, right? So when I made this 9 patch, I clipped here and here on my 2 seams together to keep them from shifting around. And then again, when I sewed 1 and 2 to 3, I just clipped here to keep those nested pieces together, and then everything lines up. You can use more pins, less pins, however you like, but that's how I did it. And when you're done, if your seams nested properly and everything came together, then you're gonna have a nice, straightforward 9 patch. Here's a photo of it laid out on my kitchen table so that you can kind of see how it all sits together. But yeah, it's very simple. If you want to make a 4 patch, it's exactly the same process as a 9 patch, right? But just with 2 patches instead of 4. 4 patches instead of 9. 4 squares instead of 9 squares. So yeah, 9 patch is done. You can square it off if you want to. You don't have to. It should measure between 14 and 14.5 inches. I don't know where my measuring tape is. So my blocks come out to 14 inches. So yeah. If you're doing part 2 with me on Friday, we're gonna end up quilting this and cutting it down to 12.5 inches anyway. So if your sides are a little wonky or funny, that's okay. You can choose to square it now, or you can leave it and worry about squaring it after quilting. So now let's get on to part 3, the disappearing 4 patch. So for this one, you're going to need 4 fabrics, 4 squares cut to equal size. I followed the Sewers Club disappearing 4 patch steps. This one is going to go much quicker because Sewers Club has a really great tutorial, and I'm going to have that linked in the description box for you. So what I'm going to talk about is what I did differently, or my measurements for this 4 patch, so that you can kind of work with that if you so choose. Again, if you just want to practice making a 4 patch, follow Sewers Club's walkthrough. It's very good. I mean, it's a downloadable pattern. I have it downloaded and printed and hanging out upstairs. So where Sewers Club and I differ is they want you to have 2 of the same fabric and then 2 coordinating fabrics. So they want you to have 3 fabrics. I did 4 because why not? I did 2 orange, 2 pink, and I did do directional fabric, but I kind of rotated them around so that no matter how my final trivet sits, something always looks like it's upright and something always looks like it's upside down or sideways or what have you. So the changes that I made to this disappearing 4 patch, and why it's called a disappearing 4 patch is that you make a 4 patch. You sew your top 2 squares together, you sew your bottom 2 squares together, you iron your seams in opposite directions, you sew your top to your bottom, you iron that too. I flattened mine so you can see where my initial things for that were, but I flattened mine. And then you cut it. So I started off with 4 8x8" squares. Because again, I'm finishing this for a 14x14" square for the oversized trivets. So I did all of that the same according to Sewers Club. I sewed everything together. And then when I went to cut it, I cut it 1.25 inches out from one of my joins. I don't remember what Sewers Club's is. So checking back on their website, they want you to cut these 1 inch in on each side. I cut them 1.25 inches so that I ended up with a 2.5 inch strip for these, just because I thought that that would balance it out a little bit better than the 1 inch strip, because they were working with 5 inch squares and I was working with 8 inch squares. So just adding that little extra bump I think works well for me. So that's what I did. I'll put my changes to this pattern down in the description box so that again you can follow along with Sewers Club, or if you're making this for the oversized trivets, you have that. And then I played around with placement on how I wanted it to look, and this is what I came up with. When you split everything apart, you're going to have 9 separate pieces, just like the 9 patch. And you're going to sew them together again, just like you would the 9 patch. You want to sew your 3 top pieces together, your 3 middle pieces together, and then your bottom 3 pieces together. For this one, I pressed my seams to the right, to the left, and then to the right, and then I got some stuff a little messed up on the bottom, but you want all of your seams pressed in a way so that they all nest together. And then again, if you want to trim them, you can. If you want to leave it like this, you can. Sewers Club has a quilt that they made with the disappearing 9 patch that's available for free as well. So if you want to check that out, feel free to head on over there and do so. And now for part 4, the pumpkin. So I wanted to give something a little bit more fun for our 3rd block, but still have it be fairly simple to follow along. Again, there's going to be a PDF written out for these, so if you want to follow the PDF, you can. I have 2 versions here that I'm going to show you and talk about, but they're exactly the same steps, just one seems a little bit more complicated than the other. So we're going to call this one here option A. We're going to call this one here option B. The only difference between option A and option B is that option A uses solid pieces of fabric throughout. So you have one solid looking pumpkin. And option B is I made a 9 patch and then I cut it down into a pumpkin shape. So if you're going to do the 9 patch like I did, the patches are 3.5 inches square, and you're going to follow the exact same instructions for how you make the 9 patch in the first part. but you are going to trim it down to 8.5 wide by 7.5 inches tall. So with this one here, you're going to be trimming like quite a bit off of your edges, but so pick like an interior fabric that you like the most and keep it that way. When I was sewing this together, I got my rows messed up. My bottom row was supposed to be my top row, so like I wanted the pumpkin and hat to be my middle piece, but this is what came of it instead, and I'm still happy with it. So if you do option B, you're making a 9 patch first, trimming it down to 8.75 across by 7.5 inches tall. Yeah. So we're gonna call the main pumpkin body A. We are going to call this is the only pattern 2 that does diagonal seams. The other 2 patterns are all very straightforward. But we're gonna call our pumpkin body A. We're gonna call our little corner seams, our little corner pieces for the pumpkin, B. We're gonna call our 2 side pieces around the pumpkin, C. We're gonna call the 2 top rectangle pieces, D. Then we have our stem that we're gonna make. The top part of our stem, our background fabric, is going to be called E. Our stem itself is going to be called F. And I labeled these kind of in the order that you would assemble them together. And then we have our exterior pieces. We've got G on the sides, and we've got H on the top. Here's a photo of them all laid out, so that I could keep track of how everything goes. Dimensions are going to be in the PDF. I'm not going to give you the dimensions here besides the 8.5 by 7.5 inch pumpkin, just so that I don't make this video super long and confusing. But in the PDF that is available, those are going to be listed out for you. It's a very simplified pumpkin. So to assemble, we're going to take our A piece and we're going, I guess it's called, what did I just learn? Snowballing or something? When you put little diagonals on your corners. So you're going to take A and you're going to take your 3 B pieces. Your B pieces are 1.5 inches square. And you're going to draw a diagonal line from your top edge down to your bottom edge. So if you choose your top left, you go top left to bottom right, or top right to bottom left. It doesn't really matter. And you're going to arrange them so that you have a diagonal on each one of your corners. You're going to sew those down right on that marked line. Open it up, make sure everything is good and centered and stable. If you don't like it, rip it out, do it again. If you're happy with it, trim the back, iron it flat, and I have all of my pieces pointing down in the back. I did that because for the 9 patch, I like to have as little seams overlapping or causing issue, and I kind of liked having it point down rather than point up. But for the sake of these blocks, where the direction of your seams don't matter as much. In future, far more complicated blocks, they will, but in these kinds of blocks, they don't quite matter. You just want to make sure your seams are ironed and flat. When that is all done, you're going to attach your C pieces to your side, 1 piece on each side, and again, I have my seams pointing out, I believe, away from the pumpkin piece. Yeah, pointing out away from the pumpkin piece. These strips measure 5 1.5 by 7.5 inches. But again, all of that, like I said, is in the description box for you. Then we're gonna focus on the stem. We're gonna take E and F, we're going to lay them flat. You're going to draw a diagonal line. Choose a fabric, it doesn't matter which one really. I believe I did it on my stem piece. You're going to mark 2 inches in. It's a 2.5 inch piece, so you're going to mark 2 inches in, draw a diagonal from that point up into whatever corner is diagonal from it. You have to choose your diagonal based on if you want your pumpkins to go left, like left to right down, or right to left down. I didn't take time to figure that part out, but here's a photo of that on the screen for you. And then you're going to lay them down so that as the photo shows you, you have your backing piece all in the back, you have your stem piece on top of it, right sides facing together, and then you are going to sew along that diagonal so that you can open it up and you have a finished stem. Your top piece, your backing piece, is 1 inch long, half an inch. Your background piece is half an inch longer than your stem piece, and that is to give you more space on the top of your pumpkin after you've finished sewing it together. What I always do when I sew these is I always sew them from where the join is up to the corner, and that is wrong. You want to ignore the 90-degree angle that your piece makes and sew across from that. As an illustration, imagine that this piece here is your background piece. You want your pumpkin piece to sit, or your stem piece to sit like this, right? So you see, I know I only have 2 colors. I should have thought this through before starting on this journey. But you have your your stem piece sitting like this. So how you want that to happen is on the inside, you want to draw your diagonal, right? Top right, top left to bottom right. By doing so, when you open it up, you get it this way. Conversely, if you want your pumpkin to sit the other direction, you want to go top right to bottom left, and then when you open it up, it sits in the opposite direction. You want to sew your line on the opposite side of the 90-degree angle that your 2 pieces are making. So if you see down here, this right is a 90-degree angle, this up here is a 90-degree angle, right? You want to sew opposite sides. If you sew going with the angle, right, you end up having this here, which looks funny, or you end up having this here, which looks funny. So to keep in mind, you want to sew across from the 2 angles. That's how it helps me, because I always mess up and always sew them in the wrong direction first and have to go back and fix it. But the angles are the most complicated part of this block. So when you have sewn E and F together, you end up with this cute stem piece with your 2 D pieces on the side. And like with what we've been doing all along, we sew our 2 pieces to each side of the pumpkin stem. Now they should measure together. Your pumpkin part, your stem part, and your body part should be the same size. If they're not, we can trim that up in a second. Once the stem part of the pumpkin is done, we then have to attach the stem to the body. If they don't quite align up, that is fine. What we're going to do is we're going to find the middle of our body, we're going to find the middle of our stem, and we're going to pin, clip, however you want to do it, those two pieces together. So how I do that is I take the two outer edges of my pumpkin body, hold those together, right? Find the middle of that, and I cut just a little tiny notch to mark my middle. You can, if you're comfortable cutting a little notch, do so. If you want to just do like a little line with like a marking pen or something, do that too. Do it on the inside of your fabric rather than the outside of, like, do it on the wrong side of your fabric rather than the right side of your fabric. But do a little tiny notch or a little mark, and then do the same thing with your stem piece. Take your two seams of your stem, fold them right sides together, make a little bit of a little mark or cut a little notch, so that you know. That way, if anything on the outside is wonky, you know that you're still lining up your stem and your pumpkin body properly. The outside can always be trimmed later. So once you line up your notches, make sure you pin or clip or somehow attach those two together. Then if you want to, run a few pins across the outside, and then you're going to sew it together. Again, like I said with the first one, all of these are true 1/4 inch seams. There's no fussing around. Probably should have mentioned that before, but hey, there we go. I am terrible at doing walkthroughs in real life, so I'm not surprised I jump around in this life too. So when that is done, you should have your top piece and your bottom piece sewn together. Now you can clean up your edges if you need to make sure that they all measure the same. My block came to 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches, or around there, with your seam allowance. If it doesn't come to that, again, it's not that big of a deal. All you want to do is trim around so that you have like roughly like a square to match it all together. And you want to focus more on trimming off from your top than your bottom. Like if your bottom is not straight, trim your bottom, but you don't want to lose too much dimension in your little tiny pieces at the bottom. You have a lot of wiggle room here on the top. So when your block is squared to your comfort level, you're going to take your exterior pieces. You're going to sew G on first, one to either side. And then you're going to sew H on, one to either side. And again, all of my seams point out. The only seam that I had point open on this one is my stem to my body, and that's just because of the layering of different pieces. But again, it's not complicated enough to matter too much in which direction you iron your seams out to. Now, as you can see, my borders don't quite match. I don't know if I cut things weird or I wasn't paying attention when I was squaring things off. I didn't square the pumpkin, but it doesn't quite matter because I'll square it later. And that's how you end up with this pumpkin. So option A looks like this, one solid piece. Option B looks like this, a patchy piece in the middle with two different fabrics on the outside. If you want, if you have the patchy one, you can always take one of your interior patches and make it an exterior border as well, kind of like this. But I had this purple laying around and I wanted to mess around with the purple. So all of my squares measure pretty good. These two My 9 patch and my disappearing 4 patch are a lot cleaner. These ones here are a little bit off. I'm not sure if it's the dimensions that I wrote out for myself or what, but I'm going to double check all of those so that the PDF is as accurate as possible. So I just filmed an interlude that you saw in part 1, but now we are on to part 5, final thoughts and sign off. This is a very disjointed video, and for that I apologize. I apologize to the viewer, and I apologize to editing Fred, who has to do all the inserts and the cuts and the clips and everything like that. She did not sign up for it, but there we have it. Part 5. What do we need to do for Friday's video? And then sign off. So like I said, we're making oversized trivets for Friday's video. Obviously I have not made those trivets yet, but I will this afternoon when I'm done filming this video. Oh, see, you had Susie and you had Junior. Junior was in the first iteration of this video that I filmed, that I was really all over the place for, and now he's in the last iteration too. So what supplies do we need to make these into trivets? I'm going to be doing 2 different versions of an oversized trivet for you. I'm pulling both of these from the Sewers Club, one of the Sewers Club summer boxes from this past summer. I don't remember what month. I think it was June, but I could be mistaken. We're going to do 2 choices though. We're going to do a 3-layer or 4-layer sandwich where we quilt all 4 layers together, or we're going to do quilt 1 layer of batting to one side, 1 layer of batting to the other side, sew them together, flip them right side out, and have no binding. So a binding version and a binding free version. So to make life, we're going to do simple quilting too, because that's all I do. I am not a fancy quilter. I am fairly new to the whole quilting process, and I get frustrated when I do too much. So we're going to do very simple. We're going to do 3 different quilt style or quilt patterns, and all we're going to need is a coordinating thread, a marking pen, preferably I prefer chalk for this rather than an erasable like friction pen. And I say that because friction pens sometimes don't fully disappear. Sometimes they leave a bit of a white cast on your fabric, especially on solids, especially on saturated solids like the pink that we have on these blocks. Chalk doesn't do that. So I would recommend like chalk or like a water soluble pen or something like that. We are also going to do the masking tape method. So some masking tape works too. I'm going to do the blue painter's tape that I have sitting upstairs. So those 2 things. You're going to need enough fabric for the binding as well. You could do scrappy or consult with one of the fat quarters or the yardage or what have you that you use to make these. But we're going to be cutting enough 2.5 strips to do 28-ish inches. Not 28, wow, 50. Junior heard my stomach growl. Each side of the trivet is 12.5 inches ish. So we are going to do 12 and 12 is 24, 24 and 24 is 48, plus the halves make 52 plus extra. So you want to have enough fabric to make about 60 inches. 58, 60 inches of binding, and we'll talk about making binding in that video too, but you need enough fabric to do 2.5 by 60 inches, and you can do scrappy or not scrappy or whatever you like. And then we're going to need batting. I'm going to use some cotton batting that I already have, and I'm going to use some Insole fleece, thermal, what have you. But if you only have one or the other, that is absolutely fine. You're going to need, if you're making one trivet, you're going to need enough fleece to do 2 14.5 inch squares. Whether that be cotton batting or Insole fleece, it doesn't really matter, but you want enough for 2. So if you're doing both trivets, then you're going to need 4 14.5 inch squares that you've already cut, or we can cut them next week. It doesn't really, or on Friday. So to sum up what we need again, matching thread for quilting, masking tape if you want to do the masking tape method, some sort of marking pen, preferably not heat removable, batting, enough batting, cotton batting, or Insole fleece, right, to make 2 14.5 inch squares. And then a bonus item will be a walking foot. And the walking foot is, so if you're sandwiching everything together, it works through the fabric much nicer. And then finally, enough fabric for binding if you are going to be sandwiching all of your pieces together. Hopefully that made sense. Everything will be down in the description box if it doesn't. So let's do our final thoughts now and sign off. So we have 4 quilt blocks that we can mess around with now for the trivets or for the future, and however you want to do it. These quilt blocks are almost large enough that you could get away with making like a small bag with them too. They're pretty easy to scale up, scale down, so if you want to make something bigger or smaller, you should be able to kind of reverse engineer that. If you have any questions about any of this stuff too, feel free to like ask in the comment section. I fear sometimes when I'm doing these videos, I'm not as clear, I'm too wordy, things like that. So if there's something you need clarification on, please don't hesitate to ask down in the comment section or fire off an email. We already know what's coming on Friday. It's going to be making trivets out of these quilt blocks. And like I said in the introduction, if there's other blocks that you want to mess around with or that you like, let me know and I might go and experiment with those, make another tutorial video, and maybe make something else out of them as well. So yeah, stay tuned for Friday's video where we turn these into oversized trivets. Monday is another Mary Maxim unboxing video. Wednesday is our Sewers Club, not Sewers Club, our quilt update video for October. Friday is undecided. I'm hoping the Cat Lady Black Cats box has arrived by then. And then the following week is another Mary Maxim video, and then after that I'm not sure. So if any of that interests you, do think about subscribing. Like the video if you've made it to the end of this too long video, and I will talk with you again soon.